land in warm and sunny Barcelona just in time for the EFMD Global Fairs by Hire. However, this year we're adding an exciting hybrid element to the Global Fairs by preparing to stream live from the EAE Business School in Barcelona, Spain.
Dreaming big is what we do. Brewing the world's most loved beers, building iconic brands, and crafting meaningful moments are what inspire us. We dream of a future with more cheers, a future that supports our people.
I love the people I work with.
Really proud of the fact that they deliver.
Absolutely fantastic.
Being a part of a change that's positive to the world.
I'm excited about what happens next.
Our communities and our planet. We dream of continuing to build a team that's more supportive, more inclusive, and more collaborative. A team that's diverse in backgrounds, skills, and experience. A team that's able to learn, grow, and adapt, to drive change and deliver results. To work together to build a more sustainable, inclusive, and rewarding future. Our passionate owners have proven that we can achieve whatever we put our minds to, and turn any challenge into an opportunity to strive for a better future. So let's take on the challenge together. Cheers to dreaming big.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of the EFMD Global Fairs by Hired. My name is Amber Wigmer-Alvarez, Chief Talent Officer of Hired, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you to this keynote today with Lara Laila Gärber, who comes to us from AB InBev. She's the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at AB InBev, and she's going to talk to us today about how AB InBev creates a future with more diversity, inclusion, and cheers. Warm welcome to Lara. Hello,
Hi,
Lara.
everyone.
Connecting from London today, I believe it is.
Yes, correct.
Excellent. So let me just share a bit of your background with everyone. Lara joined AB InBev Europe back in 2016 as a Global Management Trainee, continued the journey as Trade Marketing Manager for Germany, Talent and Development Manager BeNeFraLux, and currently takes care of diversity and inclusion in Europe. Currently working as Diversity and Inclusion Manager for their European zone, which involves building a strategy and its implementation, including training, recruitment, employer branding, and engagement to attract, recruit, and develop the best talent while fostering an inclusive environment. We're really looking forward to the discussion with Lara today. I want to mention we also have her colleague Marina from Talent Acquisition is in the chat. So whenever there's questions very specific about selection processes and the graduate programs which are open, you can chat with Marina here now. And also remind everyone that the recruiters are also live in the virtual stand. So after you hear from Lara, don't forget to head on over and engage with them one-to-one back at the AB InBev virtual stand. So Lara, I know you also come from a multicultural background. We have a very diverse audience. We have nearly 6,000 students connecting and alumni from more than 100 schools now. Tell us a bit more about your own background.
Great. So first of all, thank you so much, Amber, again for having me today. I'm really looking forward to our discussion and for connecting with the students here. So I do come from a multicultural background. My mom is half Palestinian, half Egyptian, and my dad is half German, half Austrian. And I had the pleasure and privilege of growing up in an international environment and moving around very frequently during my childhood. So I'm happy that today as well, we're in an international environment and having students from all over the world come together.
Very much so. And we have a live audience here actually at EAE Business School Barcelona. We have our thousands of students from around the globe as well. So it's definitely a hybrid element here today. And we're happy to hear more about AB InBev. I believe we have a presentation you're going to share now and tell us more. And then I want to remind our audience, both in person here at EAE Business School Barcelona, as well as those connected online, don't hesitate to share your questions there in the chat, and I will be fielding questions to Lara throughout.
Perfect. Thank you, Amber.
Just bear with us for a moment, and we're bringing it up for everyone.
Great. So I wanted to spend the first couple of minutes of our to speak to you a bit more about diversity and inclusion at AB InBev. So to start off and to give you a bit of an introduction of who we are at AB InBev, if you could go to the next slide, please. So introducing who we are. Again, one slide further. AB InBev is the world's largest brewers. So we're home to over 500 beer brands, which I'm sure many of you know and love, like, for example, Beck's, Corona, or Budweiser. And we have really a great portfolio and love having brand ambassadors all over the world. We also have 600 years of brewing heritage behind us. And back before Meta existed, Instagram, Facebook, etc., beer was actually the original social network bringing people together. One really key component of AB InBev and what unifies over 200,000 employees all over the world is the culture that we share and the principles that we have. And the culture is really defined by 10 principles that I'd like to share with you today so you can understand a bit more of the culture that we have at AB InBev. So the first principle that we have is that we dream big. We really believe that it's essential to set big dreams and to work on them together. We also want everyone from someone who's really a senior level in the company to someone who just had their first day and their first internship to be owners and to think long term. The third principle is one that resonates with me most strongly, is that we are powered by great people and build diverse teams through inclusion and collaboration. So we really see the asset of diversity and inclusion and how this not only is the right thing to do, but also really drives innovation forward. We also lead change and innovate for our consumers. We grow when our customers grow. So this one's truly essential that we not only want to grow as a company, but also as a full industry. And this truly requires partnership and collaboration externally as well. We believe in simplicity and scalable solutions. So we're not a company that's going to try and make a problem incredibly complex so that people do not understand it, but we try and simplify it as much as possible and then find a solution that would work. We also manage our costs tightly and make choices to drive growth. We create and share superior value. And lastly, we never take shortcuts, which means that we operate with integrity. And now I'd like to speak to you a bit more about diversity and inclusion. So I know that this is something that has become so popular in the recent years, and I'm sure that you, as well as students, this is something that you are aware of if you're an international student, if you're in a university that brings together students from multiple backgrounds. So not only is diversity and inclusion the right thing to do, but also has significant business results, and investing in it makes a lot of financial and business sense. So I'd just like to take you through 5 examples of the benefit of diversity and inclusion. So the first is financial strength. It was proven time and time again that it is 33% higher likelihood of achieving above average profits for companies with more diverse executives. So there is really a business case for diversity and inclusion. And I think this makes a lot of sense because if you think about challenges that you've maybe encountered, if you're sitting in a room with people who are like-minded or who are similar to you, have similar backgrounds, you might come to a solution quicker, but it probably will not be the most innovative solution possible. Second of all, brand and reputation. So as we mentioned previously, we're home to over 500 beer brands that are loved all over the world. And here, diversity and inclusion again plays a crucial factor. So 80% believe it would be advantageous for a company's reputation if their CEO were to speak on issues of diversity and inclusion more frequently. Thirdly, recruiting and retention. So 50% consider the equitability of a potential employer's work environment as part of their job search. So I'm sure you as well are starting to look at jobs and employers that you would like to move into after your studies. And I'm sure that this is also something that has come to mind, or at least in discussion when you speak to your friends, that this is a topic that people look for in addition to sustainability when looking at different employers. Then the fourth point is that once you're actually working at a company, diversity and inclusion is proven to increase employee engagement by 2.4 times. So really showing organizations that are leading in diversity and inclusion have a higher engagement overall in their company workforce. And lastly, customer loyalty. At the moment, brands are becoming very interchangeable. And one thing that is really seen to elevate customer loyalty is diversity and inclusion. So 38% of customers are actually more likely to trust brands that do well with showing diversity in their ads. We have several key messages about diversity and inclusion at AB InBev, and the three core ones that we share internally and that are really the core of our narrative are the following. The first is that diversity and inclusion is a global priority. So we have recognized that driving greater diversity and inclusion is truly important and is what brings us together as a company. Second of all, building a diverse and inclusive company. So we want to be a company that survives and lasts for the next 100 plus years. And therefore, it is critical to ensure that we reflect the diversity of our consumers at all levels of our company. And lastly, our third point is taking action together. So what is important is oftentimes diversity sits within the people team, and only within the people team or the HR team are speaking about this topic. So what we realize at AB InBev is that it is imperative to ensure that diversity and inclusion is fully integrated in the business strategy and also includes the buy-in of our senior leaders from the business. So what does diversity and inclusion mean to us at AB InBev? We try to put together an authentic narrative about who we are, something that goes along with our culture, and that also can be transparent towards people who want to apply at AB InBev. So we have a statement made up of 4 key pillars that all fuel towards our firm and unwavering commitment towards meritocracy. And here, diversity and inclusion is key. So the first component is that we strive to be an inclusive workplace with equal opportunity for everyone, regardless of personal characteristics. Secondly, we want to make our company as diverse as the communities we serve. And here it is imperative to mention that AB InBev is one of the largest fast-moving consumer goods company, which means we have a product that really is given to consumers. It's something that is tangible, that consumers drink all over the world. And as our consumer base is diversifying, we want to ensure that our company internally reflects that as well. Thirdly, we dream bigger and better when we are together. So we want to promote diversity in teams and different perspectives in order to drive innovation. And lastly, as owners, we're all responsible for diversity and inclusion. We want to ensure that this is part of everyone's job at AB InBev and that people know how to champion diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So we are not yet perfect in diversity and inclusion. We started this journey in 2016, and we've made some fundamental steps forward. However, of course, we are on a journey, and there's much more to continue to do in the next years. So first of all, one thing that was critical to us was to create an inclusive workplace. So this ranges from multiple different topics, but one example I'd like to share with you live from London today is a campaign that we worked on called It Stops With Me. And what we realized is that 9 out of 10 people working in hospitality and in the drinks industry have experienced harassment and discrimination. So this is really a striking number. And as we are part of this industry, we wanted to create a campaign and different resources that we put in place that showcase a zero tolerance policy against harassment and discrimination. So at the moment, we're speaking to different customers and retailers to bring this narrative and to work on solving this problem together, to showcase that we always prioritize people over profit. Second of all, a diverse company. So we are embedding diversity and inclusion in our employer value proposition and diversifying our talent pipeline by building strong community partnerships. So what this means is we want to understand how to reach diverse talent, but we also know that we're not the expert on this topic. So it is critical for us to partner with different organizations, like today, with you today here, but also, for example, with My G Work, which is the leading organization when it comes to LGBTQ plus partnerships. And they do great work on educating people on, for example, some key terms on this topic, but also how to be an ally and provide us with a great group of diverse talent that we can reach out to. Thirdly, Stronger Together. So we are collaborating with our senior leaders through a diversity and inclusion council that I will tell you more about in just a minute to evoke change together. And lastly, as owners of DNI, we're all owners of this together, and we want to ensure that it is a strategic priority for our zone. So just as the other principles I had previously shown you, diversity and inclusion is key and something we speak about very regularly at AB InBev. So here is to share a bit more with you, how have we integrated diversity and inclusion in our business strategy? And this was really key to ensure that diversity and inclusion is something sustainable and not just something we talk about that lacks action. So what we found to be most successful at AB InBev is a Diversity and Inclusion Council, which has 4 key pillars. The first one is called People and Workplace. And here the goal is to ensure that our company reflects the diversity of consumers and our workplace allows employees to thrive. So this one is being led by our VP Finance, Alex Pui. So I think it's really impressive that someone who is leading finance of a full organization also takes substantial time out of his agenda to also be heavily involved in diversity and inclusion. The second pillar that we have is value chain. So here we want to ensure that our diversity and inclusion efforts are reflected throughout our full value chain, so the different suppliers that we work with. And this one is being led by our VP for Procurement and Sustainability, Eric. Thirdly, marketplace. We want to ensure that our brands are agents of change in driving diversity and inclusion. I think if we think about the stereotypical ad of a beer company, or at least the way that it previously was, we would assume seeing, a lady bring together 2 beers, or it being quite a stereotypical way in which females are represented, if they are represented at all. So we want to ensure that our brands are really an agent of change and that they speak about credible social causes, like sexism, like racism. And then lastly, our communities pillar. This one is really striving towards ensuring that our company is recognized as a champion for diversity and inclusion. And this one is being led by our VP for Legal and Corporate Affairs, Sibel. So one thing that I wanted to share as a last note that we've shared internally, but I think is also relevant for you as students who want to learn more about diversity and inclusion and want to champion this, just wanted to share 4 pieces of advice that we've shared internally and that we realize are making some behavioral changes internally in the teams that we operate in. So first of all, what is key is that you seek out diverse perspectives. I think this is oftentimes also something that you experience in collaborations with your fellow students, but sometimes when you're sitting in a room, everyone could tend to agree. So what is key is really to ask proactively, can I ask anyone to disagree with me? Does anyone have a different opinion? And I think especially when you work in business and you have a senior person, a senior executive leading the meeting, it is really important to break that ice and to make it okay to challenge someone and to really say proactively, can anyone disagree with me? so that you don't think that the solution at hand is bulletproof, but that you challenge yourself to see what the limitations are and what a better solution could be. Second of all, being equitable in people decisions. So one thing that is something that we all share is everyone has unconscious bias. So it is impossible to eliminate them completely, but what we can do together is to recognize the biases that we have, even the ones that are unconscious. So this is really key in ensuring that we select the best candidate and not the person that we like the most because they're similar to us, studied in the same place, grew up in the same place, or share some similar hobbies and mindsets. Thirdly, building an inclusive team. So here, what is really key is to establish a team that is inclusive, but also has psychological safety. And a recent study at Google that really assessed over 180 teams that were performing well and not performing well. They researched what is the key attribute in ensuring that a team is successful. And before that, they asked the members of Google, and some thought that it would be team dynamics, some thought that it would be how the team is assembled. And it was actually none of those things. What is key was psychological safety. And psychological safety means that everyone feels safe to bring their full selves to work, to share their ideas without fear of humiliation or embarrassment. So what is key to building that is inclusion and trust. And lastly, what's important is that diversity and inclusion is something that changes very frequently. If you compare some of the key topics now, they were quite different than several years ago because they're linked to social movements in our world. So for example, the Me Too movement or Black Lives Matter. These things affect our diversity and inclusion agenda. So sometimes people fear that if they speak about this and they're not up to date on the latest trends, this means that they can't speak about diversity and inclusion. But what is key is that you still embrace the discussion, that you're willing to learn about it, willing to be corrected if you say something that is wrong, and speak about your commitment about learning this, about being an ally to people, and ensuring that you're creating a diverse and inclusive environment. So those are the 4 tips I wanted to share with you. And now over to you. I wanted to keep time for you to ask any questions that you potentially have on this topic of diversity and inclusion.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lara. And first of all, it's been great to see some familiar names already amongst the VPs from AB InBev in the past that have been active at our global fairs, previous editions. It's amazing to see how D&I is so embedded into the culture and the support. So you have it here. Great to see 2 VPs that are leading D&I strategy. Alex and Eric were also speakers during previous global fairs. Your culture is really strong and visible. I could not agree more. And now we can actually take a question here from the audience right away. Have you ever experienced difficulties concerning diversity yourself? Not necessarily in AB InBev, but also in your own experience.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question, Alex. I like this question a lot because this is something I ask people in our business as well, because I do think the core of diversity and inclusion is understanding when has someone had a personal experience of feeling excluded. So for me personally, coming from a multicultural background, I felt at times that I don't fully belong to one culture 100%. And I think now I really notice that this is a big asset and allows me to understand things from different perspectives. But growing up, especially when you're a child or a teenager, you want to have simple things that define you so you can feel like you are part of a group. So personally, that was for me something that I had struggled with growing up. And now that I realize is an advantage. But this is something key because everyone in life has felt exclusion at a certain level, whether it was a group of friends, a party, a meeting in which maybe someone interrupted you. Everyone has felt this in small or large circumstances. And reflecting on that makes people remember what is the power and the necessity of inclusion.
Thank you for that, Lara, that honest response. And now just a comment from the audience here. Not a question. Lara, thank you so much for your presentation. Very clear and interesting, especially seeing how D&I has such a priority in ABI's value chain. Thank you for that. I could not agree more. And really nice to hear that you're also partnering with My G Work. So for those in the audience who are not aware, My G Work is a key partner of Hired and actually celebrated their work fair, career fair within the EFMD Global Fairs, which took place yesterday. So are there any other partners that you want to mention in the D&I space, Lara?
Yeah, we work with multiple different partners. So there will be two that I'd like to highlight at this point. The first is Ariely and Company. So they're consultants based out of London that focus on diversity and inclusion, but also psychological safety, which I spoke about a bit earlier during my presentation. And they brought in really comprehensive trainings for our leaders and our employees about the key strengths of psychological safety, how to build this in an environment, and what are the repercussions if you do not have it. So, what was a key learning for us during these trainings was that psychological safety, when it is present, it really allows for trust to occur in the team, it allows for healthy challenges in the team, and it drives innovation. And when it is lacking, it leads to disengagement, fear, lack of innovation, because people are afraid of making mistakes. So I think this is something that for us was really eye-opening as a training for our organization. And the second partner that we work with is called Cognisys, and they're a leading AI institution, and they've really helped us improve our whole recruitment process. So at AB InBev, we didn't want to employ quotas in diversity and inclusion because we believe that although that is a fast way to reach it, it is not always the best way because it could be beneficial for diversity but harmful in creating an inclusive environment. So we wanted to understand what are the barriers that we currently have in our recruitment process and how can we make them more equitable to give people a fair chance. And the way that Cognisys works, it's a gamified assessment that objectively assesses candidates. And it doesn't know at any point what your name is, where you're from, what's your nationality, what's your gender, etc. And they give us very clear insights into someone's strengths and weaknesses and makes it very comparable to us using data. And using this, without having ever set a gender quota for our graduate programs, we've achieved gender parity. And I think that this is a really great example of how instead of setting an end quota, you can just make your means more equitable.
Fantastic. And you just hit the nail on the head because we've been talking about this in our CV clinics, how recruiters are starting to blind out certain areas, such as the age or even the academic qualifications, like the school, you said, those elements that can bring into play the unconscious bias that we all have of bringing on board people that are just like us, share similar interests, have studied at the same school, and going beyond those obvious places. So amazing to see the positive impact and how you're achieving your D&I goals. Anything else that you're doing to expand your diversity, equity, and inclusion goals at AB InBev that you want to get into?
Yeah, I'd just like to reemphasize again the importance of integrating diversity and inclusion in your business strategy. I think oftentimes when we've organized diversity and inclusion events, it was similar people coming to the events. It was, first of all, people working in HR or people teams, second of all, women, and third of all, people from underrepresented groups. And what is key in diversity and inclusion is to bring everyone to the conversation so we can evoke change together. It won't only be sufficient to only ever have people from underrepresented groups care about diversity and inclusion because maybe they face marginalization or exclusion the most. So bringing it together in our business strategy has helped us have a clear focus and to also give business leaders something to work towards. So just again, to focus on the three pillars that we had besides people and workplace. In a value chain, we work with so many different suppliers in Europe. We work with millions of suppliers. And now looking at as well, how can we work with small and medium-sized enterprises? How can we work with women-owned businesses? How can we work with minority-owned businesses? There isn't always the data available for us in all of the countries that we operate, but we are working with different partners like MSD Connect in order to understand this more and to build diverse suppliers that we work with. Then the second platform was Marketplace, right? So this one is subdivided into consumers and customers. So when a consumer embraces, this is you as a consumer, is the brands that you interact with. And brands that are having a social cause are becoming more popular and generate more customer loyalty. So to give you an example, there's a really great campaign that we ran in South Africa called the No Excuse campaign. And it came from an insight that I think would have made us otherwise very uncomfortable as an alcohol industry, which is that, alcohol, when it's abused or drank not in moderation, it actually increases the likelihood of domestic violence. So this is something I think we could have easily shied away from because we don't want to bring that to the forefront of the discussion. But instead of doing that, we created a campaign called No Excuse with a beer that is seen as like the ultimate alpha masculine beer, and to say that there is no excuse to domestic violence. And I think that this is really something that was done in a very powerful way. It was used in an authentic way. It had identified a problem that we were also part of and provided a solution. Then on the second aspect, which is customers, which is part of marketplace, AB InBev is part of the beer industry, and we are part of an association called the Brewers of Europe, which brings together over 10,000 brewers all over Europe. And as you can imagine, originally this was quite a traditional way to get together to really explain the process of brewing and manufacturing in a technical sense. And we meet on an annual basis. And this year we had our forum in Madrid in May. And it was the first time ever that diversity and inclusion was part of the agenda. And we spoke about how we can make our full industry more diverse and inclusive. We signed a declaration of intent with over 10,000 brewers in Europe, showcasing that we want to make our industry more diverse and inclusive. So I think it's really taking larger steps of not only looking at us as a singular company, but as well the associations and the partnerships that we work in. And then lastly, communities. So this is quite linked to legal and corporate affairs, but how can we link our ESG agenda with diversity and inclusion further? What are some community projects we can further support? So this is how we've really brought together more business leaders and the agendas that they're working with or on anyway to be linked further to diversity and inclusion.
Those are fantastic concrete examples, Lara. It really shows AB InBev is truly walking the walk and not just talking the talk. And a couple questions. I want to combine a question here from the audience with another one. I know that our talent, they often look for a brand, a specific job objective, but what about the right workplace culture? And we have a question here from Payal asking about if someone is from a multicultural environment, what can they expect if they want to join AB InBev? What would they find in the environment? So can you talk maybe about multicultural backgrounds? We have 6,000 students participating in our fairs. We have more than 1,000 currently following now from on campus here in Barcelona from all over the globe. Talk about that culture and what can a multicultural candidate find at AB InBev?
I think it's really the key in what you should look for when you're applying to companies. Because at AB InBev as well, we're an international company. We have over 200,000 employees worldwide. So in order to make a company like this work, you need a culture that transcends national boundaries, religious boundaries, etc. So I think our culture is something that you could see no matter where you are, whether you're in London, whether in Bogota, whether you're in South Africa. It's something that you can feel because it's something that is so visible and tangible within our company. So I would recommend to look at a company that has a strong company culture and that has clear examples in how it's living this culture. Also, one thing that I think is key for ABI and that links to the question that you asked is that it's not necessarily about your background, but about your potential, about the skills and your learning agility that you can build moving forward. So at AB InBev, one thing that I cherish a lot is that people move cross-functionally. So personally, I had also started in trade marketing, which is the nexus between sales and marketing. And then I moved towards the people team in talent and development, and now in diversity and inclusion. And we have numerous examples of people moving cross-functionally from finance to marketing, from sales to supply, and really completely rebuilding their skill set and learning technical knowledge in a completely different field.
Fantastic. And now, why don't you talk about how did you, in your own career trajectory, think about the opportunities and the type of work that you wanted to engage in?
This is, I think, a more difficult one because the answer isn't as straightforward. But for every opportunity I was given, for every role that I had, early on, I would write myself a list of things I want to learn in this position. And I remember in trade marketing, I also had a lot of difficulties about some of the business aspects because I had studied social sciences, so I never had a business class in my life. The first time using Excel was at AB InBev, and I was surrounded by people who had studied an MBA, who had done internships previously, and were very business oriented. So out of that role, I wanted to understand more how to set up commercial plans, how to generate business value, how to create activation plans, how to collaborate with different partners like supply and like finance. So for each role that I was in, even if it was not necessarily something in my comfort zone, I would write down a list of things that I would want to learn. And only when I checked off everything on my list did I feel like I was ready to move on to the next role. So I think what is key is to give yourself time to learn, to notice that it's okay to make mistakes, that you won't know everything from the beginning, but to just go in with a level of curiosity and openness to learn.
Excellent. And it's the first time in more than 20 years in the world of careers I've heard someone said that you had a list of the things that you wanted to learn. I think that is such an incredible approach to it. I love that. Let's take another question from the audience. And from Jesse, how does a company effectively carry out building a diverse team without the minorities, quote unquote, feeling like they were hired just to tick the boxes?
Yeah.
Tokenization.
That's a very important question. Thank you for that, Jesse. And this goes a bit towards how did we start the conversation on diversity and inclusion to begin with at AB InBev? And what was important to us is that we spoke to many external consultants who focus and who have a career in diversity and inclusion. And time again, what they had recommended to us is not to employ quotas, as it helps to reach diversity very quickly, but it could be harmful when it comes to inclusion. And that comes back to your point that you mentioned in your question here. I, for example, as a woman, I'm applying to sales. I know that they're trying to build the level of females, or they have targets on how many females they have in their sales teams. I could more easily have access to that opportunity. But once I'm there, I think I would be confronted with certain people saying, the only reason you have this role is because you're female and we needed more females. So that was important to us to say that we're going to take a bit of a longer road to reach diversity because we want to ensure that we're nurturing inclusion at the same time. And then secondly, I would say is to ensure that whatever you're doing in D&I is not a one-off approach in a time that it's popular to speak about it. So to give you a concrete example, I think what we see a lot during Pride Month is a lot of companies showing off their Pride activations, going into pink washing a bit, and potentially not really having any actions to back this up outside of Pride months. So what's important to us is that if we also leverage an event like this, if we leverage the awareness and the impressions that come out of such an event, that we also have actions to back it up, that we're doing on a day-to-day basis and not only when it's popular or can generate more awareness for us.
Very important. Now a question from Henderson. How have you managed maintaining the organizational culture while being a very diverse organization?
Yeah, so this is one as well that we had to look back at our principles, at our culture, and instead of adding diversity and inclusion to that, seeing where diversity and inclusion could strengthen a certain principle or a certain culture. So I had shared with you the 10 principles earlier, but one thing that we had previously said, for example, is we want to recruit people who can be better than ourselves, and we want to build strong teams. So this one for us was easy to say, what is a strong team nowadays? What are teams that generate the best results? And out of research that we have seen, the best teams are diverse teams. So it was, instead of creating a whole new section on diversity and inclusion that isn't linked to our culture, looking at the culture that we have at hand and seeing how diversity and inclusion can inject and strengthen certain principles further.
Now let's touch on another aspect of diversity when it comes to personality. A question from Carolina. What is your opinion on ABI's stand regarding not only different cultural backgrounds, but also different types of personalities working at the company? Are introverts welcome and respected in ABI?
Yeah, thank you so much for your question, Carolina. This one is truly important because I think oftentimes when we look at diversity and inclusion, we focus on the visible factors, so our gender, our race, etc. But there's so much more to a person than what is visible. And one thing that we use at AB InBev is we partnered with an organization called Personality Insights. And they use a method based on a Swiss psychoanalyst called Carl Jung to assess personalities. So ultimately, there was 4 different personalities that are attributed to a color, and there was different ways in which personalities can differentiate. And the 3 ways in which personalities can differentiate is, 1, are you more introverted or extroverted? Where do you get your energy from? Is it from being alone and having time to reflect, or is it from being with people? Then second of all is, how do you make decisions? Do you employ your feelings more, or do you employ more of like rational thinking? So for example, if you're buying a phone, do you walk into the store and ask the salesperson for a recommendation and go with that? Or did you already create a full Excel and you know exactly, what the 10 dimensions are that you were looking for and found the perfect phone? And then the last is whether you use your sensation or intuition. So this is really a framework that we've used at AB InBev. We've trained, or we're aiming to train our full population, our executive population, on this metrics, so that we can shed light to people's differences when it comes to personality, that people can strengthen their self-awareness and understand how others can see them, and ultimately that we can strengthen collaboration. So one thing we've seen, for example, for introverts specifically, is that oftentimes in brainstorming, the first person who speaks is oftentimes the loudest person or the most extroverted person. And sometimes introverts take a step back when that happens because they haven't had enough time to collect their thoughts. So I think one thing effective that we've done in several of our meetings or brainstormings is at the beginning saying, okay, let's everyone take 5 minutes to reflect on this and then let us discuss. And by doing something as simple as that, you see that different people engage in the conversation because they've had time to think about it before engaging in a conversation with other people.
Excellent. That was a fantastic comment and question there from Carolina. Thanks for sharing that. Now we have from Emmanuel from South Sudan. Diversity and inclusion is a great in South Sudan. What best can be done to have this resolved?
Yeah. This is honestly, thank you, Emmanuel, for this question. This one is very difficult because as a company, if your question is more from as a company, you cannot change certain local legislations or local frameworks or legalities. So for instance, my scope at the moment is Zone Europe. And in certain countries, for example, in Russia, LGBTQ plus is not something that has been legalized yet. So it's difficult for us to speak about this proactively if in the law this is forbidden. So we do at AB InBev have a general narrative that we follow on a global level, but we do have to take into account certain local legislations to ensure that we are being respectful of the local legislations and working along with that.
Excellent. Thank you. Challenging question there. Now, just tell us a bit about mentors in your career, and you've had a very successful career trajectory. Many of our students, they're asking about, how do I seek out a mentor? What advice do I ask? Have you had a mentor in your own career? And if so, can you share more?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, when I started at AB InBev, I was part of the Global Management Traineeship program, which personally was a great way to start because I wasn't quite sure what I'm looking for. I didn't know a lot of the departments in business. So the Global Management Traineeship program at that time was, or at this time still is, a rotational program where you do different projects in different functions. So I did projects from supply to marketing to people. So really, every several couple of months, you change your complete project and do something very different. And part of the traineeship program is that you're assigned to a mentor. And I had a mentor who was a senior member of our marketing team, and we spoke a lot about gender and the role of gender in the workplace. And one thing which I thought was very interesting that she told me was taking up physical space. So she asked me, okay, if you are in meetings, how do you compare the space, the physical space that males take versus females? And I started observing this, and what I realized is that oftentimes, like our male colleagues were taking up a lot of physical space, were speaking with their hands and being engaging towards their participants. And oftentimes females would take up less space and be less visible. And simply taking up more physical space makes you more present and allows you to also have more share of the conversation. So it was certain things like this that helped guide me a lot as someone who was more senior in the organization and has observed things more about body languages and cues that she was able to advise me on.
Thank you for bringing up that very important topic of nonverbal communication. It actually was not part of the plan to discuss, but it's so true. And if we think about it, it's only 7% of our communication is the spoken word. 38% is our voice, the intonation, how we use it. And it's 55%. It's, as Lara said, it's that body language. And it's having that presence and spreading out in the case of women to command that authority. And interestingly, in the world of careers, we also say, just like that 55% body language, it's 55.9% of hiring decisions are made in the first 5 to 15 minutes of that candidate being in front of that hiring manager, the person that's interviewing them. So keep a close eye on the body language. So really important then, the mentor that you've had in your career. What other lessons have you learned along the way?
I would say like the three key lessons that I have learned that I would also like to share with you as pieces of advice is first to be yourself, second of all to be curious, and thirdly to be humble. I think being yourself is as cliche as it sounds, it's imperative because if you start pretending to be someone that you're not, you might lose track of who you actually are. So remember what your morals are, what is important to you, what is your passion, what drives you forward, and bring that to you to your workplace as well. Second of all, being curious, asking as many questions as possible, even if it makes you feel stupid or if it may seem off topic at times, but truly understanding why something is done the way it is done, getting to know the people that you're working with, and understanding what background they have, how what has led them to what they're currently doing now. And then lastly is to be humble. So one thing I think the very beginning as well, coming out of university, starting a new job, there are times you could feel invincible, but I think it's important to remain down to earth, to be kind to the people that you work with, to never come from a place of arrogance, but really just simply be humble and respect people's experiences that they've had themselves.
Excellent words of advice. Be curious, be yourself, authentic, and be humble. Now, let's take another question from the audience here regarding communication. As you mentioned before, brands are also taking part in D&I in their communication. Is this something that AB InBev is aiming to do in all of your brands, in all of your campaigns?
Thanks a lot for your question. So, as mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, we have over 500 brands. So, it's not something that can be done overnight from one brand to another, because we also want to ensure that we're using a correct process in order to find a credible brand cause for each brand that we have. So, the process that we're on in Zone Europe at the moment is that we're working with an agency called Creative Equals. They're based out of London, and what they look at is how diverse are your ads? How diverse are the people who take part in it? How authentic is your communication? So they do a full recap and analysis of your brand as is. And based on this, they suggest how your brand can be more inclusive or diverse moving forward. So at the moment, we've selected our key brands in Europe, for example, Jupiler or Lef, so all of this stuff that you see in the room, and are currently auditing these brands, auditing all the communication that they put forward, and understanding what are the gaps and what social cause can we link this to. So the aim indeed would be as many brands as possible.
Fantastic. So, a tip as we get into the last 10 minutes of the session today, a tip you would like to leave the talent watching us today as to how to best engage with target employers at the fairs here today or beyond?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. I think my tip would be simple. It would be to do your research. I know it requires a lot of time investment to do that, but I think if you could go and speak to a recruiter and already, for example, at AB InBev, mention that you love our culture and explain why you love it, and then ask a question, I think that gives you an easier step into the conversation if you speak to a company that you know absolutely nothing about. So that is definitely what I would recommend. Do your research, check out different things. So here, for example, if you're interested in AB InBev, if this has woken up your curiosity, here's the ways you can keep in touch with us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, via our talent community Avature, on Twitter, and on YouTube. To just understand what are things that we are posting on, what is important to us, how you can read our annual report to see how successful we have been in the past. But that is what I would recommend to do. Focus on some key companies you find interesting, research on them, and then show the recruiter that you've researched and done your homework.
Excellent. Thank you. These are all the ways to stay connected with AB InBev. Also, there was a question from the audience about connecting with you. Are you open to talent reaching out to you for advice or guidance? Is it okay to do so as a young graduate, as Payal asked?
Yes, very happy to stay connected. So my name is Lara Laila Gärber. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I would be happy to do so.
Fantastic. And so what is it that you hoped our audience has learned from you today? You've given so many amazing tips, as many of them set out to start their career journeys. Others are looking for a career transition to a different sector, a function, company, organization. What is it that you hope that you left with them today?
I would say two things would be important for me that I left you with. First of all, is that you understand AB InBev a bit further, but not only AB InBev, but also how a company operates, what industry are they part of, what are different departments in a company, like we've shown in the D&I council that we have. And second of all is knowing that things are changing all the time. Careers that exist now potentially won't exist in 10 years. And in 10 years, there'll be careers that don't exist now. So when I started in the workforce, I knew nobody who was working in diversity and inclusion, and I've never heard of this job before. But in 6 years' time, this is now my full-time job, and I'm focusing on it every day. So I would just say, be aware of things that are happening around you, and even if they don't exist yet, they could exist in the future.
And so are you seeing an increasing number of opportunities out there in diversity and inclusion as heads of diversity and inclusion in different companies, organizations? Any tips? Because no doubt, first of all, you've inspired talent to work for AB InBev, but also I know from our audience, there's going to be people interested in working in the D&I space.
Definitely. So a personal example at AB InBev, I started working at AB InBev in 2016. There wasn't a single role focusing full-time on diversity and inclusion, and it wasn't really ever brought up in discussions. And now we have different zones, so different continents, and per zone, we have one person who is in charge of diversity and inclusion. So like myself for Zone Europe, we also have a full diversity and inclusion team sitting in New York, and we have a vice president for diversity and inclusion on a global level. So I think in 6 years, you can see that resources have been allocated to this, teams have been allocated to this, people have been allocated to this, and it's become much, much more of a discussion than it was only 6 years ago. I can't hear you anymore, Amber.
Now, can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Okay, great. And let's rewind to the start of your own career. What is it that you wish someone had told you as you started out in your career?
I would say I wish someone would have told me at the beginning to not be so hard on myself. I think especially when you start in a new place, you're surrounded by different people who potentially had more experience than you. You can quickly develop like an imposter syndrome and feel like you shouldn't be in a certain place or shouldn't have been given the opportunity that you've had. So I would just say embrace the opportunities that you're given in life and don't be so hard on yourself. Just appreciate the fact that you are there and make the most of it.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank Medina as well from your team who's been in the live chat. We have your recruiter standing by. AB InBev is a key partner of Hired EFMD, and a very warm thank you. Now, I want to also remind everyone in our audience, both virtual and in person here at EA Business School Barcelona, that we have one of AB InBev's partners that was mentioned by Lara doing our final CV clinic of the EFMD Global Fairs on day 3. We have Mishi Raymond with us today from 4 to 5 p.m. She's the development director at MyG Work, which is a global networking hub and job board for LGBTQ plus professionals and graduates. And of course, allies are more than welcome as well. So come on over to our CV clinic and see what it is that you need to be highlighting as you're targeting these companies and organizations as multicultural candidates in so many cases out there. What is it that they're looking for? How can you highlight that? What can you focus on? So I want to thank you again, Lara. I think often you don't understand the importance that you have in communicating to the talent and inspiring them. It can be challenging times. These have been difficult years, and you really have left so many pieces of advice for them as they start out on certain programs. Others are in the process of about to graduate, internships, and really some excellent tips out there in terms of how to approach your own career. So I want to thank you once again and the entire AB InBev team for being a part of the EFMD Global Fairs. And we look forward to strengthening relations and hopefully having as many hired EFMD talent as possible joining your team in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amber. Thank you so much.
Drinking beer for thousands and thousands of years. You can be a king, you can be working on a farm. Historically, everyone's always drank beer together. It's the ultimate social equalizer.
For me, diversity and inclusion means that everyone can be their authentic selves and know that you have a seat at the table.
AB InBev is unique because of our culture.
Dreaming big and going after it.
Going the extra mile.
This is the first company I worked in where there were so many languages. I was like, this is amazing.
I noticed a lot of fear, but the output and the performance of diverse teams is better.
I would like to live in a world where diversity and inclusion is so ingrained in who we are, what we do, that we don't need to have a conversation about it.
It's not just for the marginalized. That's the important part about inclusion. Inclusion is everybody.
If we, as people, can get together, we can get to show the very best of humanity.
Thank you once again to AB InBev, one of our gold sponsors. I want to take this opportunity to thank once again AXA Investment Managers, our main sponsor, as well as AB InBev, Equinor, and BBVA for being our gold sponsors of the EFMD Global Fairs by Hired. This is day 3. We still have a lot of activity happening, but I wanted to take that moment to appreciate our key partners. So head on over to the stands. They are still live. We're also going to keep the virtual stands and the fair open until 11 p.m. CEST tomorrow, October 21st. So just so you can go over and make sure you wrap up with everything and all of the people you've been meeting and making sure that you have collected that information from our partners who have been active in the virtual stands. We will keep the fairs open one extra day until 11 p.m. CEST, October 21st. But in the meantime, continue engaging with the recruiters that are active in the stands and want to meet with you, and look forward to seeing you at 4 to 5 p.m. CEST today for our final CV clinic with My G Work today, October 20th. Thank you.